Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to say thank you to the school orchestra, Iron Strings Quartet from the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering. Maybe we could do a little applause. My name is Dave Kim, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm an Asian male with short, dark hair, and I'm wearing a white dress shirt and a dark gray blazer. I currently serve as warden at Hart House, and I will be one of the event's co-hosts today. Today's event holds a lot of meaning for me as an individual that has experienced loss due to violence. And as a person that comes from a family of 6 children, that includes 4 sisters, and now as a father to 2 daughters. And as former chair of the Positive Space Committee on the St. George campus, I often consider the importance that allyship plays in these conversations.
Hello, everyone. I am Shell Yvonne Carter. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I am a light-skinned Black person with long curly brown hair, brown eyes, a purple nose stud, and a silver septum ring. I am wearing purple and black glasses and a long black halter dress with a long black tasseled robe, red and yellow paisley print. I will be your other co-host today. As a racialized, queer, non-binary femme who is a survivor of sexual and gendered violence, I'm very honored to both witness and participate in this day with all of you. I'm humbled and grateful. Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you for joining us today at Hart House and virtually via live stream to mark the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women.
Please note, this event is closed captioned. For those joining us via live stream, you can turn on automatic closed captions by clicking the CC button at the bottom right of the video player. Alternatively, we have live typed captioning accessible to our in-person and virtual guests. And to those in person, you can use the QR code displayed on the slide and on the agenda on your table. And on YouTube, you'll find the link in the video description. As we come together for this event, we also kindly ask that you not take photos or videos recordings of the event or any of its participants, including speakers, without their direct consent. Today's event has been co-organized with the university's Community Safety Office, the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, Hart House, the Sexual and Gender Diversity Office, the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office, the Institutional Equity Office, UTSC Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office, and our co-chairs, Nicole McFadgen and Kate Hawkins, and their colleagues at the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center. We're thrilled to be hosting this event as a tri-campus community with support from campus partners at UTSC, UTM, and St. George, and with communications support that has been generously provided by the Division of People Strategy, Equity, and Culture. So please, let's hear it for all the folks who have made today's event possible.
Firstly, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Thinking about the impacts of colonialism and how it affects women is important to today's event. Colonial power has had a huge impact on especially Indigenous women's lives. In pre-colonial times, Indigenous men and women often had different but valuable roles in their societies. In European culture, men were seen as superior to women. This was not the case in the Indigenous world. Colonial policies and practices tried to end Indigenous beliefs, customs, language, and culture. These attempts continue to have dramatic effects on Indigenous women's role in society and the disproportionate rate of violence occurring against Indigenous women and girls. We must acknowledge the truth that the systems in which we operate are deeply rooted in the ongoing colonization of this land, and the role we all have in reconciliation and actualizing justice for the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, two-spirited, trans, and non-binary folks across Turtle Island. Now, please take a moment to reflect.
Thank you, David. It has been 34 years since the murder of 14 women at École Polytechnique de Montreal, and as we mourn their loss and remember their lives, we recognize that the misogyny and hatred that led to the women's murders still exists today. In Canada, the United States, and around the world, women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ folks face unacceptable violence and discrimination. The National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women is about remembering those who have experienced gender-based violence and reaffirming our commitment to taking action. We recognize that the topics we are discussing today are complex, important, and sometimes very painful. So should you feel today during today's event or at any other point in time you would like to speak to someone, the university has support services available through the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center. In the room, we have Métis and Gia from the center and Scout from the Sexual and Gender Diversity Office for support for anyone needing it at any point during the event. If you need support, please find them in the East Common Room, room 1034, also known as the room where you left your coat. If you are joining us via live stream or would like to access support after the event, please contact the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center at svpscenter@utoronto.ca. Further information about the kind of support the center can provide is available on our website, svps.centre.utoronto.ca. Talking about gender-based violence can be difficult for many of us, and so to help process, we invite you to partake in some mindful doodling using the materials and directions at the craft table in the lower gallery. And please do feel free to take breaks as needed to participate in that activity at your own pace throughout the event. Today's event will begin with a word from the Mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, followed by the presentation of the Award for Scholarly Achievement in the area of gender-based violence. The award presentation will be followed by a memorial to remember the 14 women murdered at L'École Polytechnique. We will then welcome Kai Cheng Tom to present today's keynote.
Thank you, Shell. I would now like to welcome Mayor Olivia Chow. Olivia Chow has served the people of Toronto for over 3 decades. Born in Hong Kong in 1957, she immigrated to Toronto with her parents at the age of 13. An apartment in the St. Jamestown neighborhood was the launchpad for her remarkable personal journey as a community organizer, activist, school board trustee, Metro Toronto councillor, Member of Parliament, and now the first person of Asian descent to serve as Mayor of Toronto, and the first woman to serve as mayor since the 6 municipalities of Metro Toronto were amalgamated. As our new mayor, she's working hard to build a city that holds the same kind of hope and promise that it did when she first arrived here. A city that is more affordable, caring, and where everyone belongs. And I'd like to add that it fills me with pride to see a photo of our mayor standing alongside others as part of the Chinatown The Best exhibit along the walls of Hart House, if you walk along the corridor on this floor. This is one of our Talking Walls displays that was installed by the longtime No See Collective.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know what we need to do? Let's give a round of applause to the server for our beautiful lunch. Thank you. "34 years. 1989, December 6th. I remember that night well. All day I was full of shock. And then in that evening, some of us said, we need to do something. We have to not just be ourselves. We need to come out and be with others and mourn together. So we joined a rally, a march, a vigil, walking along this area, gathered in front of a beautiful statue right outside Emmanuel College, right between Victoria College and St. Mike. Some of you are nodding. You know which sculpture I'm talking about. It's a sculpture of a female crucifix. We were there to mourn together. The poster at the time to remember the 14 people, the 14 young women that have been killed, said, first mourn, then work for change. Yes, mourn and understand why this man went in, deliberately separating man and the woman, and shot, specifically, only the woman. We mourned together, but we were also called to work for change. First mourn, then work for change. So a group of my friends got together and started something called December 6th Fund. What is that? December 6th Fund is to collect a little bit of money, about $750 per person, that could be an interest-free loan for women leaving abusive relationships to start their life, whether it's provide a bit of a rent money, some diapers money, a little bit, $750 even back in those days were not a lot at all, but it's something. So that they could start again as interest-free and they could return the money whenever they can. They all do, when they got back up at their feet. So in my fundraising time for December 6th Fund, we had a lot of activities. And some of them in Con Hall and all around U of T in different places and churches. And you can't just ask for money, you need to say something. Then I started asking myself, what am I going to talk about other than those 14 women that are being killed? And I realized that I have to talk about something that happened to me, that I need to talk about something that I experienced when my dad beat up my mother throughout her life. And I, of course, was the witness of it. And that kind of gender-based violence, at that time called domestic violence, for my mom, it was a shameful thing that she doesn't talk about. So every time she was in the hospital or in a doctor's room, it was like she tripped over something, bang on the wall, or whatever excuse that she had. Until that one night, in the middle of the night, I was living by myself. I finished university already, got a job, lived in a basement apartment, and my mom, in the middle of the night, I got a call from my mom crying and wailing, calling for help. What happened, Mom? In the middle of the night, my dad broke her head. She was bleeding, and there was blood everywhere. I said, Mom, just get to a hospital. Do it now. Get to it. And then I rushed over to the hospital, and when she was all stitched up, I said, you're not going back, Mom. Come and live with me. I was able to do that, even though it's a basement apartment in Kensington Market. I was able to do that, share the mattresses, because I dragged one out and slept on the floor. I was able to do that because I had a space. There are a lot of women now with families that are escaping violence that have no place to go because the shelters often are full. And even if they are able to get into a shelter, eventually they have to leave their shelter There's no second stage housing, supportive housing for them to go to. And then they face this horrible choice. Do I go back with my kids? Do I go back to an abusive relationship? Or do I become homeless? What do I do? In all of the recommendations from inquests, from inquiry, there's long lists of things that one could do on dealing with gender-based violence. Many recommendations, many of them not being implemented 34 years later. But one of the key ones that I've decided to work on is to build shelter and housing for people like my mom. She had an opportunity. She lived with me and lived very happily and start her new life. And was able to support my late husband and I, and was just very happy. But so many did not, would not, and cannot have that experience right now because we have a housing crisis. We can't find decent, affordable housing. So yes, we are called to understand that there are many complexity. There are trans and gender non-conforming neighbors targeted for bravely living their truths. There, just even 5 years ago, a young man murdered 11 people along Yonge Street with a vehicle in the name of vile misogyny. And there are, every year, people that still feel ashamed to speak the truth because culturally they're told not to. So what we need to do today is heed the call 34 years ago to say, we mourn, but then we work for change. Every one of you are change makers, change leaders, because you're here at University of Toronto. You get the best education, you have the confidence, you have the skills to know what needs to be done. So today, I urge you to make a commitment to put your passion and your intellect into it and say that we will tell each other stories, we will build housing, we will implement every single recommendation and every action plan to end gender-based violence. Let us recommit ourselves so we could build together a city that is more caring, more affordable, and safer, and a place, a city, a home, a society where everyone belongs. Let's do this together, because together we are stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Olivia Chow. We really appreciate your support, your words, and the time you have taken to share with our university community as we recognize this year's National Day of Remembrance and Action. And now I would like to hand it over to Professor Sandy Welsh, Vice Provost Students, to announce this year's recipients of the Award for Scholarly Achievement in the area of gender-based violence.
And I'm also going to note that I'm here with my colleague who is the co-sponsor of this award, Kelly Hannah Moffat, who is our Vice President, People, Strategy, Equity, and Culture. And I'm honored to participate today. And I think the awards that we're going to give out are really in the spirit of what Mayor Chow has said, is to first mourn and then to work, and to work for that change. One way that U of T affirms our commitment to action and progress is recognizing those in our community, in particular our students, that are leading the work in gender-based violence. The Award for Scholarly Achievement in the area of gender-based violence was first given out in 2017 to recognize students who've made distinctive contributions in the area of gender-based violence research and prevention. And this award is sponsored jointly by the Office of Vice President and Provost and the Office of the Vice President, People Strategy, Equity, and Culture. The award is open to students across all programs and years of study who have demonstrated an interest and a commitment to academic work or to community or co-curricular involvement on issues of violence against women, girls, trans, and non-binary people. This year, we once again had an exceptional pool of applicants, and I'm pleased to present the 2023 awards to our graduate and undergraduate recipients. And I'm grateful that both of our award winners are here today, and I will stay in your seats while I say some nice words about you, and then I will be inviting you up to receive your certificate and to take a photo with Kelly and myself. I am pleased to announce this year's undergrad award winner, Gabrielle Tavazzani. Gabrielle is a third-year undergraduate student pursuing a bioethics specialist in the Faculty of Arts and Science. In her academic career, Gabrielle is particularly interested in areas such as philosophy of law, applied ethics, and morality. For the last 2 years, she has been part of the team at the Dr. Borna Masami Commemorative Foundation, where she has worked closely with survivors of gender-based violence in providing pro bono dental care and researching the foundation's impact. Gabrielle's dedication and work was instrumental in spearheading a new project within the foundation, Restoring Strength, a program that aims to expand treatment abilities and provide pro bono rehabilitation services to relieve pain and regaining function to survivors of gender-based violence. In addition, Gabrielle has furthered the foundation's research efforts. She has compiled, assessed, and analyzed the annual treatment report in the Restoring Smiles program for dental treatment provided to survivors of domestic violence living in shelters in the Greater Toronto Area. Her colleagues commend her for providing compassionate and trauma-informed administrative support to their at-risk patient population during monthly screening works, and her work really embodies the wonderful combination of rigorous academic research and action all together. So Gabrielle, I applaud you on this work, and I invite you to come up to receive your award. And now for our graduate recipient, I'd like to announce Neil Basturak. Neil is a PhD candidate in ethnomusicology at the Faculty of Music. Her interdisciplinary research interests revolve around sound studies, urban public space, neoliberal Islam, violence, and survival in contemporary Turkey. The first part of her dissertation, titled Shouts of Women, Songs of Children, Listening to Violence and Survival in Everyday Turkey, is her attempt to understand aggravating violence against women in Turkey in the last decade. In an examination of the media surrounding everyday forms of male violence against women, Neil's work provides an epistemology of gendered violence and injustice. She asks what the various sonic, affective spaces produced through violence against women in Turkey are, and what roles such spaces of violence play in the restoration of heteropatriarchal masculinities and necropower. Neil, I applaud you for this innovative and powerful work, and I invite you to come up to receive your award and certificate. Both of this year's award winners should be commended on their contributions in research, in action, on influencing a better way forward. We thank you for your commitment and your passion in shining a spotlight on gender-based violence and working toward a better, safer future for women and girls, trans and non-binary people. I was especially struck this year by the broad range of work we saw in our award applications: dental care, music, and all sorts of academic disciplines in between. It's apparent that advocacy for gender-based violence work can appear across disciplines and in many facets of the university and across our communities. Often this work exists in the shadows, not in the spotlight. We know that this is difficult work. Both Kelly and I know personally, because we both work in the area of violence against women in our own research. And the conversations surrounding the work can be challenging to share. But seeing our students here today and recognizing the impact they are having on research and action is incredibly important and a vital part of what we do. I also want to thank this year's award selection committee members, Professor Lana Sternak and Professor Rupali Bhuyan. Thank you for your careful consideration of our award applications. And on behalf of Kelly and myself, we'd like to thank you for lending your expertise to this review and for your own personal commitments to gender-based research and action. And thank you, and I'll now pass on the program to our co-hosts.
Thank you, Sandy, and congratulations again to Gabrielle and Neil. Thank you for leading the new generation working to end gender-based violence. I would like to now introduce Marisa Sterling, Assistant Dean of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Professionalism at U of T Engineering, who will be helping us remember the 14 women killed at École Polytechnique de Montréal.
Thank you, David and Shal, for hosting today. I stand here before you as a chemical engineering graduate of this university who was an engineering student in 1989 when this tragedy occurred. I'm a white woman with long brown hair, and I'm wearing a black dress with a white ribbon pin. And the white ribbon is from the White Ribbon Campaign, actually co-founded by the Honorable Jack Layton. Today, we commemorate a tragedy. We do this to ensure that violence of the past is not forgotten and in the hope that it will never happen again. So please take a deep breath with me as I tell you the story of December the 6th. On the night of December the 6th, 1989, undergraduate students filled a fourth-year mechanical engineering classroom. A student presentation was being given. The neighboring cafeteria and classrooms of the engineering school were busy with people, including civil, chemical, metallurgical engineering students. It was a Wednesday night, and I have just described a typical goings-on of a classroom or building in any university in Canada today. But in 1989, in the city of Montreal, Canada, this scene would change within seconds, and the lives of families and friends would change forever. What would also change is the awareness of and safety for women in engineering, and the awareness of and safety and supports to counter violence against women, women of color, Indigenous women, trans women, and so many other identities that face gender-based violence. At about 5:10 p.m., a gunman entered École Polytechnique armed with a rifle and a hunting knife. He entered that engineering classroom and ordered the women and the men to stand at different sides of the classroom. Ushering the men out of the classroom, he then said to those who remained, "You're women, you're going to be engineers. You're all a bunch of feminists. I hate feminists." He opened fire. 6 women were killed in the classroom, 3 more were shot at. He then moved through the corridors, the cafeteria, and another classroom, targeting women to shoot at for the next 20 minutes. Overall, 14 women died, 12 engineering students, 1 nursing student, and 1 employee of the university. And 14 other people were injured as well, including 4 men. Please take another breath with me. The women who were killed had names, families, achievements, and dreams. With the help of engineering undergraduate and graduate students today, we are now going to say their names and honor them, followed by a moment of silence and a short performance of the school orchestra's Iron String Quartet.
Geneviève Bergeron, second-year civil engineering student, age 21.
Holland Kogan, age 23, fourth-year mechanical engineering student.
Natalie Grotto, age 23, fourth-year mechanical engineering student.
Barbara Dagnon, age 22, fourth year mechanical engineering student.
Anne-Marie Edward, age 21, first year chemical engineering student.
Maud Havernick, age 29, metallurgical engineering student.
Barbara Kolaknik Vidayevich, age 31, first year nursing student.
Maurice Lagagnard, age 25, school budget clerk.
Maurice Leclerc, age 23, fourth year metallurgical engineering student.
Anne-Marie Lemay, age 27, fourth year mechanical engineering student.
Sonia Pelletier, age 28, fourth year mechanical engineering student.
Michelle Richard, age 21, second year metallurgical engineering student.
Anson Arnold, age 23, fourth year mechanical engineering student.
Annie Turcot, age 21, first year metallurgical engineering student. Let us now take a moment of silence to remember and honor these 14 women and all victims of violence who have lost their lives in Toronto and across this country since 1989, and those women that continue to experience violence in the communities of today. Thank you for participating in the moment of silence. Thank you to the engineering students who took time to be part of this memorial. And thank you to the Engineering School Iron Strings Quartet for providing such beautiful music to help us all today as we meditate on the issues at hand and as we are stirred into action.
Thank you so much, Marceline. Remembering tragedies of the past can motivate and inform us to create laws, policies, and programs for positive change. Survivor Nathalie Provost has been advocating for stronger gun control, and members of the engineering and STEM communities have prioritized changing their cultures to be welcoming of and safe of women. And here are a few examples. In 1989, the Women in Science and Engineering organization, also known as WISE, was incorporated with chapters around the world, including one here at University of Toronto. And to this day, the undergrad students of WISE run mentorship programs for women, by women, which research shows has the most impact on first-year students. They engage with young women in high schools as outreach ambassadors, and they organize a national conference each year. In 1990, the Canadian Engineering Memorial Foundation was incorporated under the initiative of Claudette McKay-Lassonde, the first woman president of the Ontario licensing body, and whose family is named, has the name of U of T's Lassonde Institute of Mining. This memorial fund over 33 years has provided financial support for women studying engineering at the undergraduate and graduate levels, and this year, Aileen Farnaud from University of Toronto Engineering Science Program received the Undergraduate Ambassador Award. And when accepting this award, Aileen said the following, that she had our deepest gratitude for CEMF for their belief in her potential, and said that the award not only transformed her life, but will also create a ripple effect, opening the doors for future generations of aspiring female engineers. In 1989, NSERC launched the Women in Science and Engineering Chairs program to increase the participation and retention of women in these fields and to provide role models for people considering these fields. And in 2005, under the leadership of the Ontario chair of that network, was formed a group of research-based initiatives to encourage young women and non-binary youth to pursue engineering careers through programs like Go Eng Girl, Go Code Girl, and Girl Guide badge days. So advancing to 2019, U of T Engineering then created this office that I hold today, Diversity, Inclusion, and Professionalism, which is taking a system-wide approach to resolving the barriers to a safe and inclusive experience for those studying and working in engineering. And shortly thereafter the creation, we initiated a confidential disclosure process to open up conversations about incidents of harassment and discrimination and provide resources and to support resolution. And to this day, it is women and 2S LGBTQ+ individuals that really make up the majority of these disclosures. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the positive change hadn't also been progressed by those that have made invaluable contributions from other fields, like as social psychology, business, music, ethics, as is noticed by those being rewarded today, but also through a national research consortium called the Engineering Success in STEM. So since 1989, the statistics of women in engineering have made significant gains. However, they continue to not reflect the Canadian population demographics. In over 30 years, we've gone from 15% women studying engineering to now close to 40%, a huge gain, but still not near the 50% to reflect the Canadian population. When we look at women in their engineering careers, we now see that there's 22% of the U of T Engineering's faculty that are women, and amongst them, they hold 50% of the Canada Research Chairs. But when we look to industry, women are only about 12% of licensed engineers in this country, growing from 5% over 30 years ago. So these statistics and stories that I share are here to paint a story of both positive change, acknowledgement of the selfless work of many people, and also where we have places to grow. Trailblazers to this positive change are in this room today. One in particular is Professor Emerita Jane Phillips. Having been awarded in 2023 the Engineering Alumni Medal, the highest award of the faculty, Professor Phillips became a faculty member in 1964, and for over 30 years of her career, she was the only woman faculty in chemical engineering. And she was one of the first women faculty actually in engineering. I never had any classes taught by her, but she was always reaching out to me when I was an undergrad student, offering supports and networks. This is how we create change. Professor Phillips was actually the second woman elected of the Ontario licensing body, and I had a chance to follow suit in 2020. So again, while all these statistics do show positive change, exploring the slow rate of gains found to cause this unwelcoming culture is very important. Many women continue to be confronted with gender-based violence and lose their sense of self, their inner drive to survive, the ability to defend themselves, and the voice to speak up. And as gender-based discrimination and harassment is not the only barrier facing these pursuing engineering and other STEM fields, we know as well that Black, Indigenous, racialized women and girls in Canada experience additional and compounding discrimination. And newcomer, migrant, undocumented women are also not afforded the same opportunities. We know that trans, non-binary, gender-diverse people also experience greater rates of unemployment and increased risk of violence. And let's not forget about the economic marginalization as well with the current gender gap. On an hourly basis, women make 87 cents on the average dollar made by a man. And that gap expands to 47% for women of color, 42% for Indigenous women, and 43% for women with disabilities. So today we reflect, we remember, and we respond. All of this is preventable, and it starts with us taking action. Later today at 6 o'clock in front of the Galbraith building at 35 St. George Street, a group of women engineering student leaders will unveil a student-led, student-built monument. It is one action they've taken to standing with the victims of ongoing gender-based violence. So until the violence against women has been eradicated, we remember these 14 women and their families, and we bring awareness for the need for further actions and support. So let's remember the families of the loved ones that have died or been harmed by violence against women. Let's honor their spirit. And remember that 1/3 of gender-related femicides of women and girls are primarily motivated by the accused anger, frustration, or despair. I'll close by saying that the eradication of gender-based violence and all forms of oppression is collective work. Going back to Nathalie Provost, a survivor of the Montreal massacre, when she emerged from hospital, she had been shot multiple times and so profoundly wounded that she had to learn how to walk again. She said the following: "I ask every girl in Quebec and everywhere in the world who wants to be an engineer to keep this idea in their mind, because engineering is a great profession." That is a voice of resilience. Thank you very much for making a personal commitment today to find your own avenues and continuing to work beyond and work with each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marisa, for leading us through that difficult moment and reminding us why we're all here today. Before we begin our keynote, we'd like to take a moment to prompt everyone to check in with their bodies and join us in a brief stretch. You're welcome to do so however you wish. So, it is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Kai-Cheng Tom. Kai-Cheng Tom holds an MSW and MSc and is a certified somatic sex educator, qualified mediator, clinical hypnotherapist, and professional coach based in Takaranto or Toronto. She is also the author of 6 award-winning books in various genres, including the recently released Falling Back in Love with Being Human, available now from Penguin Random House, Canada. Kai-Cheng's work focuses on the intersection of social justice, pleasure activism, and transformative approaches to healing conflict. A noted speaker and practitioner of wellness, healing, and group facilitation, Kai-Cheng supports individuals and groups who are seeking to repair relationships and make transformative change. She also teaches as adjunct faculty at the Institute for the Study of Somatic Sex Education. If you would like to submit questions for consideration, you can visit menti.com throughout the presentation and enter the code 6738-3527 or scan the QR code on the screen. You can also use Mentimeter to upvote your favorite questions, and additionally, we will have a microphone available during the Q&A if you would rather ask your questions live. Nicole McFadyen, co-chair of today's event and assistant director of education at the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center, will support our question and answer period. So please join me in welcoming Kai-Cheng Tom to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to properly acknowledge everyone gathered here in just a moment. But first, I'd like to read a letter to a lost sister. I stopped writing poems for a year after it happened. I didn't believe in them anymore because they didn't save your life. I'm not a praying woman, but poetry has always been my hotline to the universe. I guess that somewhere deep inside, I hoped that if I said something beautifully enough, that it would come true. That if I spoke the language of beauty, maybe God would finally start listening. Are you there, God? It's me, the transsexual with a savior complex. I'd like you to turn back time. If I could just go back once, I'm sure I could change the past for the better. Did you know that the word abracadabra comes from a Hebrew phrase meaning through speaking, I create? I bet you do. My magic was never enough to manifest the miracles I wanted, to turn back time, to undo harm, to make the unspeakable things safe to say, to catch a spirit as it flies out of this world and weave it back into the body it left behind. What's the use of writing poems if they can't even do that? I wish I could talk to you. I've been wanting to tell you that complex post-traumatic stress disorder and a crisis of faith have so much in common. They're both about losing trust in the world in the wake of unbearable loss. Grief tears us away from our faith, but it's grief that brings us back as well. In our deepest grief, we have nowhere else to go. The Buddhist part of me knows that in the paradox, enlightenment is born. When you fell through a crack in the world and disappeared, I started meditating again. I lit candles every night, tied a red rope around my waist before sleeping, anything to give my grief somewhere to go. For a year after it happened, I dreamed about getting lost in mazes and screaming without a voice, knowing that no one was coming to save me. But the Christian part of me knew the secret of grace is choosing to believe. The secret of resilience is the art of surrender. I wish you were here. I'd tell you all the things I've learned about hope and forgiveness and holding on while letting go. Our world keeps breaking over and over again. I have no choice but to believe that a new one is being born. I'd like to begin by thanking the original caretakers of this land, the University of Toronto, and in particular, Kate and Nicole of the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center for inviting me to speak with you today. Can we give everyone who is involved in organizing this event a big round of applause, please? Thank you all for being here, for showing up and embodying all that you are. Thank you as well to those of us who have supported us to be here, including the people who maintain and clean this building, the people whose labor in this country and elsewhere has contributed to the possibility of us sharing this space in an elite Canadian university, sometimes, or even often, in the context of unjust and exploitative circumstances. Let us acknowledge and work towards solidarity with people who are migrant and racialized, particularly women, because no woman is free until all women are free, and none of us are free until all of us are free. I invite us to take a shared breath together. I'd like to see it. Yeah. To land together in this moment of commemoration, this moment of contemplation toward the possibility of a world liberated from gender-based violence. Who could we be in that world? And who would we have to become to create it? My intention today is to offer 3 invitations that I hope will support us to move through the valley of fear and into the world of love that we so desperately dream of, the world that we need. But first, I must talk about our collective grief. There is so much to grieve and to honor today, so much to remember. On December 6, 1989, at École Polytechnique, Marc Lépine shot and killed 14 women, as well as injuring 10 more women and 4 men, after which he took his own life. His stated reasons were fighting feminism, a reflection of misogynist hatred echoed in his suicide letter. In the years since, In the years since that tragic and terrible event, the feminist struggle against gender-based violence has continued and evolved. Yet despite the brilliance and resilience of so many women and gender-diverse people in the world, the onslaught of violence against women and gender minorities has continued and even intensified. Today, I am thinking of the women murdered at Polytechnique. I am thinking of the over 4,000 Indigenous women and girls who have gone missing or been murdered in so-called Canada since 1956. I am thinking of the 4,690 transgender people reported murdered around the world since 2008, the vast majority of whom were racialized transgender women, and of the rising animosity toward trans people that is currently manifesting in public discourse, as well as in legislation around the world, including in this country. I am thinking of the many thousands of Palestinian women, as well as men and children, killed and injured by bombs, their entire families and neighborhoods destroyed in the past 2 months, and the fact that this state-perpetrated violence is continuing on this very day at this very moment. And I am also thinking of the Israeli women who have reported experiencing sexual and physical violence on October 7th and other moments this year. For in the context of colonization and war, violence against women and gender-diverse people is always weaponized, an awful reality that cuts across identity and nationality. I am thinking of the women of Sudan and the women of Congo, of all the women who have suffered at the hands of misogyny and colonial violence. I am thinking about how, on June 28th of this year, in a terrifying echo of the events at Polytechnique, a man walked into a classroom at the University of Waterloo and asked the professor what the subject of the class was. On hearing that the class was about philosophy of gender, he stabbed 3 people in an attack that is now widely believed to have been motivated by hatred related to gender-diverse identities and gender expression. In short, the hatred of trans people. As I speak these words, recognizing how charged they are and how vulnerable we all can be, I feel a great valley of fear opening deep within me, a shadowy abyss that threatens to swallow up and annihilate my connection to hope and humanity. And perhaps listening, you feel it too. That icy cavern deep within that is afraid of a world that is violent and cruel beyond reckoning. Fear of being dehumanized and destroyed by people who refuse to recognize our inherent worth, dignity, and sadness. Fear of the monster that we have seen others become, and fear of the monster that those others seem to sense lurking within us. if you are indeed familiar with the abyss of existential fear, with dread at gender-based violence, if you are perhaps at risk of falling into that abyss, then I want you to know you are not alone in the depths. Here is my first invitation for you. Let us walk through that valley of fear together. You know, I am quite afraid to be here today. I can feel my legs shaking, the cold in my fingers where the blood is flowing out of them in a rush toward my pounding heart. To be a woman, to be a transgender woman at this moment in history, offering a presentation on December 6th is controversial, to say the least. Others might say offensive. And indeed, many people, several hundred, if likes on social media are representative, have expressed offense about my presence here. Some are outside today. Some of these individuals declare that U of T's choice to invite me to speak is, and I quote, sacrilegious, gross, disrespectful to women, hatred for women, an utter disgrace, and there is even a post on the social media platform known as X, formerly called Twitter, comparing my presence here to Nazism. It is tempting, in a way, to dismiss these words as pure spite and nothing more, to write these people off as cartoon villains, beneath my attention and undeserving of my empathy, yet the truth is, I don't believe that anyone is undeserving of empathy. And I am affected to my core by transphobia and misogyny. They keep me up at night, haunting me with questions to which I do not know the answers. And though the valley of fear continues to open wider and wider within me, I cannot shake my unyielding belief that it is only through empathy and compassion that a lasting solution to violence and hatred can arise. Fear is the beginning of dehumanization. I cannot help but suspect that when profoundly disturbed individuals, such as those who commit acts of gender-based violence, such as the Montreal massacre or the stabbings at the University of Waterloo, that the hatred is rooted in fear. Fear that men's privilege and power in society is being overtaken by women's rights. Fear that cisgender people's safety and comfort will be endangered by the expansion of trans people's rights. Prejudice always begins in fear. Transphobia, the fear of transgender people. Xenophobia, fear of the stranger. When our fear overtakes our capacity for empathy, our capacity for love, we lose the ability to see the human in the other, and so they become a monster in our eyes, a being who must be restrained and defeated at all costs. Feminist thinkers and scholars have shown us how misogynist violence is based on the idea that women are monsters. We see this in the hateful rhetoric of self-declared incels that says that liberated women are a threat to society. We see it in the common attitude of individuals who commit intimate partner violence, wherein the perpetrator justifies the violence they have committed by creating a narrative in which the survivor supposedly made them do it by acting in an emotionally triggering way. As feminists, we know how gender-based violence justifies itself through the language of fear. And I believe that as feminists, we can only achieve a world free of gender-based violence by steadfastly refusing the temptation to use that same logic, the logic of fear, in our own defense. So here is my second invitation for you. Please, let's not allow the shadow of our fears to extinguish the light of our empathy, the light of our compassion. Let us never surrender our capacity to love. This is why I cannot bring myself to so quickly dismiss the words of those who are opposed to my presence here today. Why I wish so fervently that they could find it in their hearts to extend that same invitation to me. Because while we may disagree vehemently with one another's views, I deeply see and understand that their fear of me is rooted in their own experiences of pain and of violence. I cannot cede my own rights, nor can I be responsible for transforming another person's trauma. But I can be responsible for transforming my own. You cannot cede your own rights, nor can you be responsible for transforming another person's trauma, but you can be responsible for transforming your own. When we allow our fear to override our empathy, when we surrender our capacity to love, we lose access to the path of liberation, descend into the securitarian mindset, the obsession with our own safety, even at the expense of others' freedom. We become divided and suspicious. We start to believe that the only way we can achieve goals such as justice and peace are by forcing other people to do what we believe is right. We demand that rule breakers be punished and that the other be kept segregated away from us. And we see this dynamic in the ways that the historic white women's rights movement came to espouse racist and imperialist views, reinforcing the oppression of Black and Indigenous communities by claiming that white women were endangered by them. The securitarian mindset demands hierarchies and refuses solidarity. It's us or it's them, so we must always choose ourselves. When fear overrides our empathy, we become unable to see the ways that the endless quest for safety through the exclusion of others cuts us off from curiosity and connection. How we come to enact the opposite of the values we espouse. But I believe that in our braver hearts we know domination has never brought justice, and exclusion has never brought peace. Japanese-Canadian author and Canadian literary icon Joy Kagawa recently introduced me to the term philoxenia, which means love of the stranger. Philoxenia is the opposite of xenophobia, and I believe it holds the antidote to the climate of ongoing polarization and division in which we find ourselves. To love the stranger in the valley of fear is to open ourselves to solidarity across difference. Loving the stranger is remembering that, as Lilla Watson and the Queensland Aboriginal activist group remind us, your freedom is bound up in mine. As a trans woman, I cannot give up on the possibility of building solidarity with feminists who espouse trans-exclusionary politics. As a woman of color, I cannot give up on the possibility of building solidarity with white women and women of different racial experiences than my own. And as a woman, I cannot give up on the possibility of building solidarity with people of other gender identities, including men, because the truth is we need one another. We cannot create a world free of gender-based violence on our own. So this is my third invitation to you as we travel through the valley of fear. Let us embrace the love of the stranger. Dear friends, I believe so strongly in us all, in feminists, in women and girls and gender diverse people, in the capacity of human beings, even now. I believe that another world is possible if we can create a culture where we do not allow our collective fear to override our collective empathy. If we can center empathy and solidarity as the primary principles through which we respond to harm and to violence. All around us, the tides of turmoil and violence continue to rise, and I have no doubt that even more trials are ahead. But I also know that sometimes, in the midst of despair, enlightenment is born. The valley of fear threatens to swallow us whole, but the light of love blooms from within and between us if only we let it. So let us walk through the valley of fear together. Let's never surrender our capacity to love, and let us embrace the love of the stranger. The moment we begin to act as though a better world is possible is the moment that starts to be true. I'd like to conclude by reading another love letter from a revolutionary feminist living in the distant future. It begins with an epigram from poet Andrea Gibson's poem Ashes. And all they know of hate is that it couldn't beat the love out of me. Love letter number 30. Tonight, I am looking up at the stars and thinking of you. Though the smoke from the fires that continue to ravage all life on this planet, I can still see the light of the heavens. I like to imagine you there, looking back. I wonder what you must think, seeing all that's happened since you were alive, since you fought for your freedom and for ours with a band of fierce and fabulous sisters, weird siblings, brothers grim and gay. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have known you through more than the scraps of poetry and story your generation left behind. So many cycles have passed, so many empires that rose and fell, taking our history and our so-called progress with it. I want you to know how sacred you are, how much it means to us that you existed at all, that you left evidence behind, that you lived and breathed and hurt and hoped. I want you to know we didn't win, not exactly, but we took the stories you and your brethren left behind and wove them into a new way of being. We never stopped hurting, but we learned how to heal. We never stopped harming one another, but we learned how to grow through our wounding in honesty and forgiveness, developed the secret technology you dreamed about, the sacred ways of loving that transform pain into pleasure, violence into grace. I want so much to make you proud. There are still those who hate, who hunt, who cannot bear their own incompleteness and therefore try to destroy us. There are still those who only know how to burn and destroy, and in the end it may be that the burning appetite of those hungry ghosts will swallow us all, but you taught us that even ashes are sacred. Flowers still grow from the scars in the earth marred by poisonous flames. Love still endures. Love survives. Love revives. Love redeems. Love forgives. Space and time themselves might end, and the essence of what we are would still remain in a place beyond reckoning. Wait for us there. Dear ones, we are coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kai. Thank you. We now have time for some questions. We've received a flood of live stream questions, so I'm going to alternate with questions we've already received online and audience questions as well. So to get us started, our first question is, Kai, what do you see as the connection between racialized and sexual or gender-based violence?
What an important question. Thank you. Racialized violence is not separate from gender-based violence because gender-based violence takes on a racialized dimension. I think many, if not all, of the racialized women and gender-diverse people in this room can probably think of a moment when either racism came in a gendered form or when gender-based violence came in a racist form, either in your own lives or in the lives of women and gender-diverse people that you know. There are historic examples of racialized women in particular being weaponized or being brutalized as a tactic of war, as we're seeing around the world now. And we can also see how if we do not approach gender-based violence from an intersectional lens that accounts for colonization and racism, women of color and gender-diverse people of color will be left behind, have often been left behind in the progress of the women's rights movement. So this is the connection that I see, that we have to be looking intersectionally and that we have to be accounting for all people who experience gender-based violence. Great question.
Thank you so much, Kai. Is there someone in the audience that would like to ask a question? We have a traveling microphone if you would like to indicate with a wave. All right, while folks decide if they do have an in-person question to ask, I'm going to continue with the ones we've received via our live stream question submitter, Mentimeter. So our next question for you is, Kai, how can we support minority groups experiencing hardships, experiencing violence from colonial systems?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I think there might be some scholars in the room who have ideas that can be explored more fulsomely in a different format. But how can we support people experiencing gender-based violence from colonization? Was that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is such a deep question. I think The first answer that feels important to give as somebody living in Canada is that we need to focus on Indigenous rights and the facilitation of empowerment among Indigenous women, girls, and gender diverse people. I think that if we take this as like a first focus and we look to center the voices of Indigenous peoples in responding to gender-based violence, then that helps us to start to understand what the way forward might be.
Thank you. I'm going to continue to give a pause for audience question opportunities, but I'm also, if I don't see folks indicating that they'd like to ask one at the microphone, I'll keep going. So just putting that out there for everyone in the room here. Oh, go ahead.
It's scary to take the microphone in a room this large.
It is. I will say, oh, Shell, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Scout.
Hello. I'm going to try and say this in a most coherent way. I was just curious, in that you're seen as such a leader in certain movements to do with like gender and sexuality, I'm quite often aware of how I guess like idolization can become dehumanizing in and of itself, and the pressure that it must take to be sort of at the forefront of a lot of these movements. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to how to rehumanize figures such as yourself, in that we're all sort of seen as like have our own place in, building a future that we want to see.
Oh, I so appreciate this question. If I understand it correctly, it's that we can sometimes unknowingly dehumanize leaders in movements that are important to us by idolizing them. And I mean, I love attention, but so it's not that bad. But I think it can be challenging. I think this actually points to like a deeper problem within social movements that's really important, which is that it can be very tempting for us to give away our inner power to somebody else, to invest in a speaker or a poet or an activist or a politician, the agency and the power that is in fact our own. We want to hear answers. We want to be led out of the valley of fear by other people, and they shine so brightly, they have a beautiful light. We forget that the light belongs to us. And two things happen when we give away our light to other people. First, we dehumanize them because we stop seeing them as real, and the light of a movement is too much for one person or even 10 people to carry. They burn out, they act out, strange things happen, but also we rob ourselves and our movements of real power, of what is true solidarity. And so, my invitation in response to this question of how do we rehumanize leaders is to rehumanize ourselves, and to remember that real leadership is always about being led back to your own power. That's what I would say. Yeah. Great question.
Thank you so much, Shell. The next question I have for you from online: what are some ways to start the conversation from a place of love with people fearing acceptance of women and gender diverse folks?
Oh. Complex. Coming from a place of love for me, I think must begin with coming from a place of courage. And it is like one of those unfortunate injustices of the world that those of us who experience the most discrimination, the most marginalization, are often those who have the most wherewithal to lead with love and courage first. It is not fair, but it is also the truth. This is not to say we need to give ourselves away to hatred, or that we need to expose ourselves to violence that crosses our boundaries, but I think it's an invitation for those of us who want to lead, who have found the light inside ourselves, to start by knowing that the people who espouse hatred are trapped in the place of fear. And when we have the space inside ourselves to make room for that fear and to explore it with curiosity, I think we have a better chance of transforming that fear and leading people into the land of love. If we are finding that we have trouble doing that, raise your hand here if you're like, I should lead with love, but honestly, I'm just pissed off. Anyone? Just a few of you? Wow. Enlightened crowd out here. I tease, if we are finding that we have trouble feeling love of the stranger, particularly the fearsome stranger or the hateful stranger, I think that's an invitation for us to stop and do self-care. It's a signal from within that we need to receive love. And when we have received enough, it's easier then to give it to others. Great question.
Thank you so much. Do we have another audience question?
Over here. Oh, a few.
Thank you. Shell and I did not plan this, for the record. Thank you for your honesty and for being so vulnerable with us today, and thank you for sharing as well some of the commentary that you've seen through social media, and recognize, it takes a lot to share that and really to acknowledge a lot of the hatred out there. And I love that you're promoting and sharing with us that message around starting from a place of love. So my question is around, we're seeing so much, and I don't want to say today because it's ongoing in terms of legislation, policies within schools, a lot south of the border, and even here within Canada, things around use of pronouns and so on that really, I think, contributes to this broader discourse and negative energy really that further propels, I'm going to say, gender-based violence. And I suppose my question is, what would you like to see from allies? Maybe we're going to start from that. How do we bring others to be part of that conversation, to explore that learning, and to really invite them to start from a place of love as well, when it's something that feels so different or foreign, or so how do we invite that? And I guess the theme is sort of around allyship, and what would you love to see?
Oh, allies for gender-based liberation, right? Like allies for trans people and gender diverse people. This is the most important question right now, I think, for me, because we are seeing such an upswing in backlash toward the idea of trans rights. And I think what I would love to see from allies actually is like the practiced capacity to receive people who are not allies of trans rights with love. Because that's what actually creates space for trans people to not have to engage in that conversation directly, which can be a lot for us, right? And in order for allies to do that, I think that there's an invitation for allies actually to really explore gender diversity within themselves and within society. Like, I think there can be the idea sometimes that trans and gender diverse, that two-spirit people are like over there, right? Like a segregated corner of difference that should be protected. And this idea, while well-intentioned, is of course saviorism. I would love for allies to question within themselves, why is gender liberation and liberation for trans people actually intrinsic to their liberation, like to the liberation of allies? And it's actually not so hard to think about, because raise your hand in this room if anyone has ever told you you were doing your gender wrong. Yeah, this happens a lot. When we make space for trans people, we make space for more freedom for everybody, and then it becomes a little bit less of a foreign kind of issue, right? There are real concerns that are being brought up by people who are opposed to trans rights. Like, I don't actually find it useful to pretend that those fears don't need to be responded to. I worked in trans pediatric care for a long time in my career, and a common question that parents have is, well, what if my kid is making a mistake and they transition and then they regret it for the rest of their life? It's a common sense question, actually. It would be good for every ally in this room to know how to respond to that question from a grounded place. Probably lots of you are allies and don't know how. There are good answers to that question out there. And it begins with embracing that parents of trans people need to be supported to raise trans people. I was looking at some of the discourse around the so-called Million March for Children's Rights, which was a march against the provision of gender-affirming care to children in this country. And I was really disheartened to see from allies racist rhetoric coming out, like telling migrant parents to go home and that sort of thing. We need an intersectional lens, and we need a lens of love, and I think that allies are the best positioned people to apply both that intersectional lens and the lens of love at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do you have capacity for more questions? All right, I'm gonna go with another online question we've received, which is, thank you for sharing your beautiful words on this day. How do you remain hopeful in the work that you do?
Oh. What a good question. I don't always remain hopeful. It's a rough time out here. Raise your hand if you have trouble being hopeful. Yeah, it's a lot. For me, I think that hope is different from optimism. Someone gave me that distinction a little while ago, and I thought it was so great. Optimism is the belief that things are going to work out. I have no idea if things are going to work out, but I have faith. Someone once asked me, because the title of my 5th book is I Hope We Choose Love, I got asked on the radio, well, what makes you think we're going to choose love when people aren't often doing that in the news and stuff? And I was like, the title is not I think we'll choose love or chances are we'll choose love. The title is I hope we choose love. And this brings us back to faith. It is faith that allows me to be hopeful, not faith in a God or in spirituality, but faith in human beings. We're not always going to be good to one another. I think that's clear. But we can be. And that's just my rootedness in that reality is how I keep going, and I invite you all to join me there. We can be better.
Thank you so much, Kai. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Reshma?
Hi, Reshma.
Sorry, I'm calling people out by name because I know
Hi,
your
Kai.
face.
So nice to see you. I really appreciate what you said about approaching folks with love and the nuances of folks who are coming also from equity-deserving groups, from marginalized communities who are out there marching from a place of fear. And I grew up in Thorncliffe and Flemington Parks, and I appreciate seeing the fear and also wishing that the fear wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about how you've really centered listening. And I think as allies and as folks experiencing this kind of harm, I'm thinking about how you might invite us to listen deeply and what works for you in those moments when you know, uh-oh, I'm having trouble listening. And do you have anything that works for you in those moments?
Oh, yeah. First of all, it's great to see you. and second, how do we listen when the words that we are hearing are very painful to hear? I got to practice this while I was writing this presentation because I thought, I'm just going to go look at all the all the comments. So I got to practice this and really kind of curiously explore, like, what happens inside me, and when do I need to disengage? And I noticed that what happens for me, I don't know about everyone else in this room, that the moment that I disengage, that I start to see the fearsome other as a monster, is when I'm really terrified for me or the people I love. So it's hard for me, there was a moment a few years ago in Vancouver where I grew up, where a large contingent of the Chinese evangelical community, which is the community I was born into, was quite vociferously protesting against the implementation of gender-neutral washrooms in schools. And the rhetoric that was coming out from that community, the community I was born into, was not fun to listen to. I go in with my adult brain and I'm like, remember, people like my parents and my family come from dispossession, from traumatized migration narratives. It's good to be compassionate. And actually, I was just terrified and enraged because what I could hear those people saying, what my heart heard those people saying is, we don't love you and we don't want you. And that's the moment, right? To watch. Our fear rises up when we hear rhetoric, language, that makes us feel like we're under threat or the people we love are under threat. And I think that's a moment for us to really be with that fear and ask, am I genuinely under threat right now? Like, it's bad for me to read the social media comments about this event. But if I'm reading them from home, I'm at home. And even if there might be some of those people here today, I am not under threat right now. And if that were to happen, real threat, I could retreat, take myself to a place of safety because I'm privileged enough to do that. But I think really being with that fear and asking that fear what it needs from us to be okay to listen more is like the answer. What does the fear need from me? It needs me to know I love myself. I love all trans people. I'm here for Chinese trans people, for migrant trans people. I'm here for all those communities. I love them. And that knowledge keeps me curious.
And I will say thank you. Thank you so much, Kai, for sharing your words with us today and your person.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor.
Yes, again, thank you so much, Kai Cheng Tom, for your reflections, your beautiful words, and for creating this moment with us.
I just want to echo that. Thank you. That was very powerful. It's been 34 years since the murder of 14 women at École Polytechnique. As we feel their loss and remember their lives, we recognize that the misogyny and hatred that led to their murders still exists today. We mourn the more than 1,600 Indigenous women and girls who are missing or have been murdered across decades. We mourn the 22 people killed in Polytechnique and Wentworth Valley, Nova Scotia, 3 years ago. South of the border, we mourn the 5 killed in an act of transphobic and homophobic violence at Club Q in Colorado Springs last year. Across the world, more than 300 trans and gender diverse people were killed in 2023. We know that women and gender diverse people who are Black, Indigenous, racialized, living in poverty, or living with disabilities are at greater risk. In Canada, the United States, and elsewhere around the world, women, girls, and 2S LGBTQ+ people continue to face unacceptable discrimination that threatens their lives. The National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women is about reflecting on this solemn truth, remembering those who have experienced gender-based violence, and reaffirming our commitment to action.
So in closing, I would love to reference a message gifted to us through Kai Cheng Tom's recent work, Falling Back in Love with Being Human. To be human is to hold contradiction, and it is through moments like these that we are all starkly reminded of humanity's capacity for violence, but also for love. And so I wish that we may all keep meeting along the path as we continue to build our bridge to hope. I wish all of us strength and gentleness on our continued journey to end gender-based violence. I would like to thank everyone involved in today's event and the organizing committee for making it happen. The crafts table in the lower gallery just outside the Great Hall will be available until 2:45, so please feel free to stick around for mindful doodling as a decompression activity. Thank you all for coming.